Hello mates, I hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to be going through each placement on your arm and rating how much they hurt to get tattooed until we eventually settle on what tattoo placement hurts the most on your arm. Now I've gotten pretty much every placement on each of my arms tattooed at this point, so I feel like I do have enough experience to say how much each place hurts to get tattooed. Now of course, with this being my list, this is just my opinion based on my experience. I may say that getting your wrist tattooed feels like getting hit by a car or something, whereas you may say, I didn't feel a thing. That's fine, that's your experience. This is mine though. With that being said, let's get into it. So first up, as I've already touched on it, let's start with the inner wrist. Now both of the tattoos that I have on my inner wrist are relatively small and therefore only took between like 20 minutes and half an hour. But let me tell you, getting your inner wrist tattooed is not the nicest feeling in the world. You have so many nerves on your inner wrist, and I felt like I could feel the needle like in the palm of my hand during the tattoos. The wrist is definitely not the worst place to get tattooed, but it's far from being the most comfortable place. I would give inner wrist tattoos a 7 out of 10 on the pain scale. If we then move around the wrist to what I would call the outer wrist, this was much nicer for me. I guess you have less nerves in the outer wrist than you do in the inner wrist. Both of the tattoos that I have on my outer wrist took much longer than the ones that I have on my inner wrist, with them taking about 2.5 hours each, but they were so much easier to get. The only thing that I would say about these areas is they're much more prone to swelling, and I had like a Popeye arm afterwards for a few days. The outer wrist, I would give a 5 out of 10. Next up, if we move on to the inner forearm, this definitely hurts less than the inner wrist as we move further away from the hand. These again are relatively pleasant places to get tattooed on your arm. I would give these a 5 out of 10 on the pain scale. If we then move around to the outer forearm, again relatively easy in the center. As we get further towards the elbow ditch though, things get a little bit more uncomfortable, but it's by no means excruciating. I would give this placement a 4 out of 10. Right, let's move up the arm onto the elbow ditch itself. And this is where things get really spicy. Not the most spicy that it gets on the arm, but it's certainly up there. There are so many nerves in the elbow ditch, and I can only describe getting this area tattooed as just feeling like really hot. Like it felt like the needles suddenly got really hot as they went over this area. Again, it's not excruciating, but it's certainly more than enough for you to go, fuck, that hurts. I would give the elbow ditch an 8 out of 10. If we then move up onto the elbow itself, I'm sure some of you have heard people talk about getting their elbows tattooed, and I will just say it feels pretty much exactly how you would think it would. There's no real muscle or fat on the elbow, so you can feel the needle kind of grinding on the bones, which is not the most pleasant feeling in the world. I would give elbow tattoos an 8 out of 10 as well. It's a very different sensation to getting your ditch done, but I would say the pain levels are equal. Spoiler alert, there is one more placement on the arm which I think hurts even more. Now let's move up onto the outer bicep. In my opinion, getting your outer bicep tattooed is the easiest place to get tattooed on your arm. It does get a little bit spicy as you get towards your shoulder, but it's still for sure the easiest place to get tattooed. I remember being shocked by how easy I found it the first time that I got my bicep tattooed. Like, you build it up in your head so much before a tattoo, how you think it's gonna feel, and the outer bicep is easy. 3 out of 10, I would say. Now if we move around to the back of the arm and what I'm calling the back of the bicep, things get a little spicier here in this area, especially as you get towards the armpit and when you're closer to the elbow. Again, this is another place that hurts but is not excruciating by any means. It just feels quite uncomfortable at times when you're getting this area tattooed. I would give the back of the bicep a 6 out of 10. And lastly, but absolutely not least, we get to the inner bicep. It's this one. This is the most painful place on the arm to get tattooed. Fuck me, this shit is unpleasant. This area just bruises really easily and starts to feel really tender, and when you get right up in the armpit, this shit absolutely fucking sucks. This video isn't really about healing, but trying to heal this area is really difficult just because you have to try and keep yourself from touching your arm against your body, because 1, it's really bruised and tender afterwards, and 2, because if you have any moisturiser or ointment on it, it all gets wiped off when it rubs up against you. When I was healing both of my inner bicep tattoos, I just held my arm away from my body basically for like 3 to 4 days afterwards, which was not the most fun I'd ever had. If you have someone in your life who you really don't like, get them an inner bicep tattoo for their birthday. I would give this placement a 9 out of 10. I don't think any placement on the arm warrants a full 10 out of 10. I think a 10 out of 10 is reserved for like getting your palm tattooed. That shit must really suck. And that is it. Those are ratings for how much I personally think each placement on your arm hurts to get tattooed. I would love to hear what you guys would rate your tattoos as pain-wise. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. If you did enjoy this video, give it a like, hit the subscribe button, and all that other YouTube bollocks. If you like the music that you're hearing in the background, it was actually all produced by me. I have another channel where I post beats/instrumentals that I've made for singers to use to write songs to, so if that is something you are interested in, I'll put a link in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.